For the Love of Autumn by Patricia Polacco. Does anyone know why there's only one name at the bottom of the book cover? Because Patricia Polacco is the author and the illustrator. When Danielle saw Autumn for the first time, she held that tiny kitten in the palm of her hand. She marveled at how perfect and small that creature was. Danielle named her Autumn because it was almost Halloween. It was love at first sight. Picture holding that tiny kitten in the palm of your hand. Can you imagine how small that kitten would have to be to fit in your hand? Poor thing, you look like you haven't eaten in a long while, Danielle said as she gave her warm milk and a bit of food. Then Danielle made a special little bed for her to sleep in. She set out water and kibble and a litter box. What's kibble? Kibble is cat food. As each day passed, she loved the kitten more and more. Soon Autumn was scurrying around the apartment. She tipped over the trash, pulled the laundry out of the hamper, knocked over the pencils and papers off the desk, and jumped out of Danielle's lap as they were sitting. What does scurrying mean? Scurrying means running around, like a little cat would when they're excited. Danielle was a student teacher. When she came home from school and tried to correct her students' papers, Autumn would lie right in the middle of them. After dinner, Danielle would pop corn and they'd sit on the sofa together and watch TV. And at bedtime, Autumn would curl up in Danielle's arms and purr and purr and purr until they both drifted to sleep. One day, as Danielle opened her mail, she squealed with delight. "Oh, Autumn, I got the teaching job. It's in Port Townsend, Washington. I've always wanted to live by the sea, and Port Townsend is right by the sea." When Danielle packed for the move, Autumn hid in the packing boxes. She wrestled with the packing shreds and pounced on the bubble wrap, popping it as she landed. Danielle and Autumn drove together all the way up the coast of California, through Oregon, and into the state of Washington. Finally, as they came over the crest of a tall hill, there it was, the beautiful little village right next to the sea. The school had arranged for Danielle to rent a lovely cottage right by the bay. An enchanted cottage, she thought when she saw it. Autumn loved her new little house. The first thing she did was disappear right up the chimney. When Kitten finally came down, she was covered with soot and ashes. Autumn helped Danielle unpack. She got inside every paper bag that hit the floor, jumped into every box that was emptied, and almost knocked over a stack of Danielle's finest china. That first evening, Autumn and Danielle sat on her sofa eating popcorn and looking out the window at the sea as the warm fire crackled in the fireplace. Does anyone know where the state of Washington is? You can imagine a map, and on the west coast, all the way at the very top corner, that's where Washington is located. It's very pretty up there. Danielle loved her new school and adored each and every one of her students. Miss Parks, they asked her one day, "Are you married?" "No, not yet, but someday, when just the right man comes along, I will be." "How will you know he's the right one?" one of the children asks. "I'll hear the sound of thunder, smell a jasmine, and the wind will blow his hair. I'll know just then he's exactly the one." "Oh, Miss Parks, do you think he's out there somewhere?" little Mary Proctor asked. "Indeed I do. I can just feel it," Miss Parks answered wistfully. Yes, Danielle Parks loved her students, and she loved her little cottage almost as much as Autumn did. She planted a cottage garden. She pulled weeds and fertilized the lawn and trimmed the hedges. She even painted the wonderful old
Trestle.
Trestle? Trellis?
Trellis. I was getting confused.
As for Autumn, she loved the place. She raced about the garden, stalked butterflies in the flower beds, climbed up apple trees, and even perched herself on the trellis so she could watch the birds in the new bird bath. Both of them settled into their new life in that little cottage by the sea. One afternoon, when Danielle got home from school, a terrible storm was raging. There was thunder, the sky was black, and the raindrops, big as bumblebees, hit the roof with a pinging sound. Autumn didn't greet Danielle at the door like she always did. Danielle searched the house but couldn't find Autumn anywhere. She called her next door neighbors to see if they had seen her. Oh, she's probably hiding out somewhere with this fierce storm, her neighbor reassured her, but Danielle was worried. Late that night, Danielle heard a scratching sound at the door. She opened it, and there was Autumn. She was soaking wet, and her tail had a huge gash in it that was bleeding. Danielle reached for her, but Autumn shrank from her touch and ran into the night. Danielle ran after her. She walked around the neighborhood in the driving rain, calling, "Autumn, Autumn!" But Autumn didn't come. She had completely disappeared. I'm going to read read this again and tell me if you can identify a simile in this first paragraph. One afternoon, when Danielle got home from school, a terrible storm was raging. There was thunder, the sky was black, and the raindrops, big as bumblebees, hit the roof with a pinging sound. Autumn didn't greet Danielle at the door like she always did. Can you identify the simile? Maybe think about the raindrops. You're right. The simile is big as bumblebees. When Danielle left for school that morning, she left the back door ajar in the hope that Autumn would come home. From the context clues, can you identify what ajar means? She left the back door ajar in case Autumn came home. She left the door open or cracked. All that day, her students noticed that something was wrong. "Miss Parks, where do you think Autumn could be?" Jamie Ross asked Danielle. After Danielle told the class she was so worried. "I think all of us should come to Miss Parks after school today and look for Autumn," Jerome Bolton announced. Caleb Dirk stepped up. "Yeah, some of us can take on the beach. You guys can look up in the woods on the hill. And you girls stop by every house to see if anyone has seen her." The children were true to their word. They showed up to Miss Parks' cottage. They launched a search that would be a shame to the FBI. But alas, there was no Autumn to be found. Which of the 7 habits are these students presenting? I think they're synergizing, working together to help someone in need. Days stretched into weeks. Danielle cried almost every night just thinking of Autumn. There had been rumors that a mountain lion had been seen, and her cottage wasn't very far from the state park where the lion had been spotted. Danielle feared for the very worst. She walked around the little cottage and cried whenever she looked at anything that was Autumn's. She picked up Autumn's empty little bed and ran her hands over it. She looked at Autumn's paw prints on the windowsill. She didn't eat popcorn anymore, nor sit and watch the sea by the fire. Danielle's heart was broken. Finally, Danielle put away Autumn's food and water bowls. She took all of her toys and put them in the bin in the laundry room. But she couldn't bear to put Autumn's bed away. She couldn't bear to brush Autumn's fur off the sofa cushions. Danielle ached for the loss of the heartbeat of her little cottage because to her, that it was Autumn was. On Saturday, Danielle and her students planted a small bed of flowers where Autumn used to lie in the shade of an apple tree. The children polished the rocks and placed them in a circle on the ground. "We'll call this Autumn's garden," Benny Barber whispered softly. "I think she would have loved that," Miss Parks said. Just as the children were about to leave, there was a small sound, and something jumped off the trellis into Miss Park's arms. It was Autumn. "Autumn!" Danielle cried, out as he hugged her. "Where have you been?" The children surrounded them and gave a group hug. "You have been gone for a whole 6 weeks, but Miss Sparks, she doesn't look like she's been in the woods. Look, her fur is shiny and clean. She looks nice and healthy." Benny Barber noticed. "And her tail," Danielle said as she examined it. "There was a horrible gash the night she ran off. It looks like it has been shaved and some stitches taken out. Someone has taken wonderful care of Autumn." Autumn stuck close to home for the next week until one day she left again, only to return the following weekend wearing a flea collar. "Well, for goodness sakes, who put a flea collar on you?" Danielle wondered as she took it off. "I have a collar for you, sweetie. Pink. Your favorite color." Then one day Autumn went away again and came back 2 days later with a phone number scrawled on the collar. What does scrawled mean? Scrawled is like scribbled or jotted down real quick. "Children," Danielle announced in class that morning, "someone has put their phone number on my cat's collar." "Wow," they all exclaimed. "We have a real mystery on our hands," Johnny Carter said. He thought for a minute. "Someone must think that Autumn is their cat." "Well, she's my cat," Danielle asserted. "Miss Sparks, you have to call that number. You have to tell that person she's your cat," Benny Barber insisted. That evening, Danielle paced the floor. She wasn't accustomed to calling someone whom she'd never seen before, but Danielle circled the phone and kept looking up at her as if she wanted to call. "Well, here goes," Danielle said as she dialed the number. "Can you predict why there's a phone number on the collar?" A voice answered the phone. "Yes," Danielle started. Well, my cat seems to have your phone number on her collar." "Oh, thank God you found Stormy." The voice sounded relieved. "I've been so worried." "Stormy? Her name isn't Stormy. Her name is Autumn." Danielle felt her face flush. "Oh no, I named her Stormy because she came to my house on a terrible stormy night, badly injured. Her tail had been slashed. Probably by a mountain lion." "No, sir, you don't understand. I have had Autumn since she was a kitten. She disappeared on a stormy night from my home. She's my cat." "Well, if she's so precious to you, then why was she out in such a terrible storm?" Danielle quickly hung up. "What nerve," she snorted. "What a rude man." What do you think the differences are between Danielle's house and Stephen's house? Or the man's house? Do you think that there's a difference between Stormy and Autumn, even though they're the same cat? When she told her class about the phone call, they were all intrigued. They spent all afternoon doing drawings of what they imagined this rude man looked like. That afternoon, Autumn came in the house with a note attached to her collar. When Danielle opened it, it simply read, "Please accept my apologies. I didn't mean to be rude." Danielle quickly sat down and wrote a note back. "I apologize as well. Perhaps I was rude too." She attached the note to Autumn's collar and sent her out the door. 2 afternoons later, Autumn came back with another note attached. "Since we both care so deeply for this little kitten, perhaps we can share her. I live alone and truly love her company." What's going to happen? When Danielle shared the most recent note with her class, all of them decided that she needed to invite the note writer over to her house so she could meet him. "Oh, children, I'm not in the habit of inviting a perfect stranger to my home. But Miss Parks, he's obviously a lonely old man, and he can't be that bad of a person if he helped Autumn, could he?" Benny Barber said. All right, I'm going to ask him to stop by this Saturday, she said. Oh, can we come too? Her entire class pleaded. We want to meet him. Miss Parks agreed, and all that afternoon the children helped her compose the invitation. Saturday was a dark and rainy day, but every kid in Danielle's class was at her house by early afternoon. All of them had their faces pasted to the front of the window to see what he would be like when he came to the door. Every time a car drove up, the children would shriek with delight, only to sigh when the car passed. Finally, just when it looked like he wasn't really coming and they had turned away, there was a knock at the door. Autumn ran to the door. As Miss Parks opened it, there was a clap of thunder. The wind came up and blew the trellis so the jasmine vine unraveled and a clump of it fell into his hands. Then another gust blew into his hair, into his eyes. Miss Parks, I'm Stephen Noten. I think we share a wonderful little cat. Can you predict what's going to happen? Autumn sprang into his arms and purred and purred and purred. Danielle beamed as she gazed into his face. This little cat is the heartbeat of my house, Mr. Norton said softly as he caressed Autumn. A clap of thunder echoed over the bay, and the wind caught jasmine vine and scattered blossoms everywhere. Why, her students whispered to one another, Miss Parks has found the one, the very one. And Autumn had found them both. Stephen Noten and Danielle Parks were married by the next spring. They not only shared an enchanted cottage by the sea, but walks on the beach, evenings by the fire eating popcorn, and most of all, their love, Autumn. What clues were in the text that showed you Stephen was the one? Were there any hints when Stephen showed up you thought, that might be the one for Miss Parks? And did any of you predict this was going to happen? I certainly didn't see it coming. The end.